Hello YouTube Vintage Stereo Collectors. On the bench right now I have a Sansui AU2900 from the 1976 model year. Has a nice faceplate like that. Aluminum faceplate. One of the first years to have an LED light on the front. And this is about a 25 watt per channel receiver, but like a lot of the stuff from the classic era Japanese audio, it's over engineered. Has an all metal chassis. It's actually some type of galvanized so it doesn't corrode. But this one was at the point I bought it from another collector who had done some repairs on it, and two, I guess, of the output transistors were blown, so those were replaced, caps on the power board, and it was sounding pretty good. Then I started to use it a little bit and I noticed a few little things, a little bit of a hissing in one channel and then an intermittent on the output, and I thought, well, okay, you know what, everything else looks pretty much original in this unit, let's do the complete rebuild on it. So a few things to say about these Sansuis. When you get into this series, all the controls, switches and controls, are pretty much on one board except for the power and a couple of toggles. So to get at any of the components on this other side, you got to take quite a few things apart, and it is a bit of a pain to work on. I have replaced every cap on that side of the board, and there are quite a few of them. And what I noticed is the original caps were these Elnas. Somebody put in some used parts, Chemcon caps. These are actually older. These are from the 60s. I don't know why you'd use that for a repair. And then there are these 1 microfarad ones that were put in. These are actually in the tone control path. And then there are actually some older Nishikons from another repair job. So there are 3 generations of caps. And then a couple of these gold Nishikons on this board. So I brought them all up to date. Anything that wasn't a new capacitor has been replaced on every board. And that, it just makes it reliable. But it is a slow process, one at a time, flipping the board back and forth. And then just talking about this board right here, one of the issues, and I remember going back to the 1980s when I started doing bench work, one of the techs I worked with had an opinion about stuff, and he had been working on stuff 20 years longer than I had. And I'd say, oh, we got one of these Sansuis in, and so when I started working on these, they were, about 8 years old, and people were still repairing things back then. They didn't get a new one unless they had to. And he'd say, oh, those Sansuis, yeah, watch the soldering on those. Circuit boards are terrible. And it's true. I'll show you on the back here. You can't go hotter than 25 watts, and you have to be very, very quick. And I found in several places where capacitors have been changed, it had lifted the land or actually tore it right off. So I had to do a little bit of repair, and it's not that hard to do. Where land is broken, you just use a little piece of solid wire, like about 24 gauge wire, and bridge it over. Not a big deal, but so they're all repaired. It's all solidly soldered, new caps. I replaced all 4 output transistors, so I used tip 31Cs and tip 32Cs, and then I check the HFE on my meter, so I match each pair, and then the other pairs match to be fairly close. That's one of the things I like to keep these amps balanced. So on one side it had original transistors, which were slightly lower current rating. I mean, they worked fine and everything, but something was cutting out over on this side of the board. One thing I also have to say about these, and anything from this year, you see the white, it's not on here anymore, but they use gobs and gobs of that white silicon zinc paste as a heatsink compound, and that stuff just makes a mess. When it hardens, I found it can sometimes become conductive. And what I actually use a silicone grease, like an industrial high heat silicone grease. You can get it, from places like Canadian Tire even. and that's better. It doesn't melt, it doesn't move, it doesn't dry out, and it's very easy to remove. It's clear so you can see everything. So clean this all up, new transistors, resoldered everything, and I'm going to put the faceplate back on once I get this board in and tested, and we'll see how it works. Some of the things you got to do to get this apart: the push buttons, you can't pull the knob, so you see this board here? These are the push buttons. The knobs won't come through the panels. You have to take them off. They're glued on. I thought I was either going to have a parts unit with 5 broken switches, or I was going to get this rebuilt. So that's one thing, you got to be very slowly rock them off until the glue comes off. Some kind of contact cement. But these Sonys are great. I like Kenwood, Sony. Not as much Yamaha. I've had some issues with them as they age. But this should be a great sounding amp when it's done. Thanks for watching and listening.